Welcome to episode 5. In this episode of my new numbered series of puzzle pieces, I will mostly be covering the Revelation 7 sign in the heavens. It will be a sort of recap for some, and maybe some new info too, plus showing some spreadsheet documentation that might help you see things in a different way. I'll be giving a super fast review of a few things first, because some might be struggling with some of the things I've been showing. I won't linger on it all before I get to the fun stuff, and I'll try to word things a little differently, and it will be a great review for most of us. So let's jump right in. And a lot of these picks will be totally familiar too. I've talked a lot about our precession, which causes our backdrop of stars to appear to move across the heavens over very long periods of time. I'm not going to go into the mechanics of it all, but if our backdrop of stars was stationary and never shifted, then our sun would always rise in the exact same place every year on the same date, as far as where exactly the sun would be on God's clock on any given date. Like these screenshots I'm showing. If our backdrop of stars was totally frozen and hadn't moved at all since the time of Jesus, then these pictures would be the exact same dates. The sun is in the same spot on God's clock on these dates. But because of the precession, our current calendar has shifted by about 27 days. And that's how I get from Jesus' birth date of September 11th of 3 BC, and now falling on October 7th on our current calendars. These are star dates, and where our star actually is on God's clock. As you know from all the calendars, you can name these dates whatever you want. It doesn't change God's clock in the heavens. And the same as John the Baptist's birth of 313 of 3 BC, because he was 6 months older than Jesus, which is 182 days. On our current calendars, this date or marker on God's clock is April 8th, and the very date of our last eclipse. As you can see, it's that same star date when the sun is on that band of Pisces. With everything I've seen now, I'm sure that's why Jesus is quoted in Luke chapter 21, verse 25, that there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars. And no one is going to change that. God has set his signs in the heavens. One of the main reasons that true knowledge is always encrypted in texts is because anyone wishing to change those texts has no idea what to change, because they are clueless as to what the texts are actually telling us. So, this shift in our backdrop of stars causes our calendars to keep shifting as we keep up with the seasons. Although they've tried to remedy this with the Gregorian calendar, but it can all get confusing because over long periods of time, our seasons shift across this backdrop of stars, like in these pictures. During Moses' time and the great exodus from Egypt in 1446 BC, the spring equinox, or the first day of spring, happened when the sun was way over at that hind foot of Aries. And now our spring begins when the sun rises due east, way over between Pisces and Aquarius. And it's not that our season is moving, but it's the curtain of stars that's moving. And I'll show this again from episode 1, but I've moved my position down around the equator because the stars rise straight up at the equator, and it might be easier to understand what I'm showing here. Also, the further you get away from the equator, the more of an angle the stars will rise at. So most of us are accustomed to seeing the equinox picture at much more of an angle, where that fish of Pisces is laying over more and not standing straight up like this. So we think of the sun as rising below the belly of the fish of Pisces, but it really isn't, as I'm showing here. The red E for due east is on the 0 degree of the equatorial grid line. And all throughout the year, the same stars that are on this line will rise due east each day. If that makes sense. The stars of the fish of Pisces have not risen due east in a long time now. And as you can see in this capture from this year of 2024, if you look at that line, the first stars of Aquarius are now rising due east every day. And in this picture, our backdrop of stars is moving from the right to the left over time. And I'll show here side-by-side pictures of 100 years ago in 1924, and this year of 2024, and 100 years from now in 2124. You can see the shift of the fish of Pisces moving further and further to the left of the 0 degree line. But you can really see the difference in the movement when you look at those first stars of Aquarius and the water pitcher. 100 years ago, it wasn't really even close to the line. And 100 years from now, it's way over the line of due east, well into the age of Aquarius. And this is a close-up of those first stars of Aquarius to cross the line of due east. On the left is showing right now in 2024, and on the right is the year 2030, when we can really see that both of those first stars of Aquarius have crossed the line of rising in the east by 2030. And what this is showing is that we are no longer in the age of Pisces, and the age of Aquarius is here. And that's what the book of Revelation is about, the end of the age. And all throughout Revelation, John talks a lot about what he sees in heaven. I'm sure most have heard of the Revelation 12 sign that appeared 33 days after the Great American Eclipse, back in 2017. And it's certainly been a huge asset for the Watchman community, because it pinpoints a specific date in time that John is talking about, so we can all be certain that we are in the ballpark of the end times prophecies. And that was nearly 7 years ago now. In the first verse of chapter 12, John writes, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And this was sundown on the 3rd day of the Feast of Trumpets." There's a lot more to that prophecy, but I won't go into it all now. You've probably seen these wheels that I've posted before about the changing of the ages. John begins his narrative by telling us in chapter 4 what age he is seeing, as he describes the 4 beasts that he saw in the throne room in heaven. I've talked a lot about this in previous videos, so I'm going to go through this fast. For each age, we have 4 different beasts of heaven, occupying the 4 corners of the earth, which are God's divisions of the light and the darkness. They are the 2 equinoxes and the 2 solstices of the year. And I'll show a picture of stellarium in a second so you can see all this in your mind. When the age of Pisces sort of first started during Jesus' time, the 4 corners were Pisces the fish, Gemini the twins, Virgo the woman, and Sagittarius. John tells us that the 4 beasts were the lion, Leo, the calf or Taurus, one with the face as a man, which is Aquarius, and one that was like a flying eagle, which is also known as Scorpio. These were also the same 4 beasts that occupied the 4 corners during the age of Taurus. But way back then, the bull or Taurus was the spring equinox and the head of the year at that time, and probably why all the bulls that you see in statues of the ancient Sumerians in Mesopotamia. It was their age. Then the age of Aries was the age of Abraham and Moses. And of course Jesus was the church age of Pisces and the fishers of men. So this is what our 4 corners look like now in the heavens that John described. These are all the sunrise points in this year of 2024. At the spring equinox, we have Aquarius on the horizon. At summer solstice, we have Taurus, and we can't even see Gemini anymore. At the fall equinox, we have Leo and the beheading of Virgo. And as we get further into the age, Virgo will not appear at all at sunrise for the fall equinox. Virgo is a huge constellation, but soon she will not be a part of the story anymore. At winter solstice, we no longer see Sagittarius, but only Scorpio rising on the horizon. In the first verses of Revelation chapter 7, John tells us that he sees 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, which he's already told us about. I'll just read what he says. And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, Hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. So just the same as the Revelation 12 sign that John said he saw, in order to know what time John is speaking from, we have to find the time when John would have seen in heaven 4 angels occupying each of the 4 corners of the earth at the same time. And at the same time, he also sees the angel who is commanding them all. And that angel is ascending from the east. This is the Son he is talking about, who has the seal of the living God. And in order for John to have seen the sun rising in the east, it must have been near one of the equinoxes, when the sun does rise due east. It would have to be close to March 20th or September 21st, or thereabouts. To see this puzzle in another way, I'll show this from my previous video about all this. This would represent the ecliptic, or the great circle that all of our planets travel around, and passing through all of these constellations. If you look at this as a clock face, then our 7 main luminaries that we see are the hands on the clock that I have colored here, with the dots representing planets, including the sun and the moon. All of these crazy hands on God's clock will be moving at different speeds, and at times some of them will be going backwards too. Some of these hands may race around the clock in a year or less, and actually the moon will race all the way around in a month, while the sun takes exactly 1 year to make the rounds. And Jupiter takes about 12 years to go all the way around, and Saturn takes nearly 30 years to go all the way around. And Neptune, which isn't even one of the 7 on my clock here, takes 165 years to go all the way around the clock. But Neptune was certainly right there in the waters of Aquarius during the Revelation 12 sign. Yes, 165 years to go around the clock, but actually crossed the line of the waters of Aquarius exactly 7 days before the Revelation 12 sign. So what John is telling us is, if you see this as a clock face, he saw at least 1 planet at each corner of the clock, at the 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock positions. 4 planets at the 4 corners of the earth. And at the same time, he saw the sun rising in the east. At minimum, this is the sign that John describes seeing in the heavens. At least 1 planet at each of the 4 bases, and the sun in the east, either rising in Aquarius or rising in Leo, or close to Virgo's head, around our current fall equinox. So, of course, I jumped on Stellarium and started looking back in time around each of the equinox dates of fall and spring each year, and quickly saw what I was looking for. And this is actually what I found. Not just 4 planets at the 4 corners, but all of our 7 luminaries occupying the 4 bases. And looking at all this, I was thinking, this is impossible. And this is what I was seeing in Stellarium. At home base Aquarius, just 7 days before the equinox, and of course the sun rising in Aquarius at that time. We also have Venus, the church, right there in the belly of Aquarius. And of all things, Mercury, the messenger, is exactly on the line of the waters of Aquarius that very day. On first base, Taurus, we have the moon, which will only get further into Taurus as it gets later in the day. Sitting at second base, Leo, we have Jupiter. And at third base, Scorpio, we have Saturn and Mars. And perhaps Mars, the god of war, is playing shortstop. It only makes sense. And as I was looking at all this and thinking how unreal it was, I realized that this date is 313 of all things. It is the exact same date as the menorah sign of Revelation 15. And this Revelation 7 sign occurred in 2016, which is exactly 8 years and 8 chapters from the Revelation 15 sign. and both signs are the opening verses of those chapters. And what's even more unreal is that these dates of 313 are John the Baptist's original birth date of 313 in 3 BC. One major significance of the 313, besides the fact that just the numbers themselves represent the 3 candles, 1 candle, and 3 candles of God's menorah of his 7 spirits that the book of Revelation is about. But day 13 in the Bible, Nisan 13, is the day of the Last Supper, the 13th day of the first month, the betrayal, the broken covenant, the arrest, and the denial. Well, Genesis 3:13 is our defining moment. When the Lord God said unto the woman, "What is this that thou hast done?" And the woman said, "The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat." What's more is that the biblical 2,520 days, the biblical 7 years of going around the circle of 360 degrees 7 times, just as in the story of Jericho, the 2520 day count from this sign was exactly to the day when the Turkey earthquake started and the 7th seal. And then it was exactly 400 days from the Turkey earthquakes to the 0 hour of 3/13 of 2024, when the Revelation 15 sign happened. I think the 400 days is representing the 400-year biblical cycle, and our time is up. And the Turkey earthquakes were also on day 37 of last year, and the menorah formation was day 73 of this year. These are both prime numbers, and the 12th and 21st prime numbers. These numbers also add up to 33, which is Jesus' number. So, still in disbelief, I decided to make a spreadsheet and really take a look at what's going on here. Even though I think I've scrolled through yet another 50 years on either end of this spreadsheet, and never seeing a solution to John's puzzle, I realized that there was no point in continuing to look. I already know that John is talking about the age of Aquarius, so why bother looking all the way back to the year 1900, or way out past the year 2050? We don't have that long. So this is what the spreadsheet looks like. This is no doubt small print to try and really see here. I've uploaded this JPEG to my new web space, and you can download and enlarge it if you like. I wanted to find out how rare of an event is it really that John states that he saw in the heavens at the start of Revelation chapter 7. This spreadsheet covers the years 1986 through the year 2030 by simply scrolling through every single day for 50 years on Stellarium. And you can do this in fast speed most of the time by holding down the little day counter button on the Stellarium timestamp. What I do is back out in Stellarium until I can see 3 of the 4 corners of the earth at once, like what I'm showing here on my screen now. Like watching Aquarius, Scorpio, and Leo all at once on my screen, as I quickly scroll through the days, months, and years, watching all of God's luminaries racing around the clock. And they all follow a line, so it's not hard to keep your eye on it all. If I find a day when there are luminaries occupying each of those three constellations, I simply spin my stellarium around to see if there is also one of the seven occupying or standing on the other corner, which would be Taurus. If Taurus is empty, then I continue on. If I ever found that all four of the corners or constellations of our current equinoxes and solstices for the age of Aquarius, just as John gave us in chapter 4, and I saw that they were all four occupied at the same time, like he told us he saw in chapter 7, then I noted it on my spreadsheet here. And I noted which four angels or planets exactly were occupying those four constellations, which are the four corners of the earth for the age of Aquarius. And as you can see, I've marked down all the dates and years, spanning from the year 2032 all the way back to 1986. I feel I was very thorough in what I was doing here, and you can even see a lot of maybes in parentheses, because it was a little questionable as to which constellation the planets were really in. Like, they might have been off to the side a little, and perhaps actually in the next constellation. But all that doesn't really matter when you really look at this chart, because there were only 5 times in 50 years when all four constellations were occupied at the same time and anywhere near an equinox. And I highlighted those 5 times down that sort of center column where I have written that the sun was ascending east, because that was what I was really looking for, since it is one of the requirements to work out John's puzzle. 5 times in 50 years, when the sun was ascending in the east, even close to an equinox, when the 4 bases were loaded like John describes. However, I then realized that the sun counting as one of the 4 angels that would be occupying a base doesn't actually count, does it? John tells us that the 4 angels were occupying the 4 corners or bases, and the sun was also rising or ascending in the east. So if you see in bright yellow the 4 instances where the sun was rising near an equinox, but it was the only one occupying that base, and that's not what John saw. So those dates don't count, do they? There must be 4 angels or planets at the 4 corners, and the sun must also be ascending in either Aquarius or at least near an equinox date of fall and spring right now. There is only one time in all of these 50 years, from the early 1980s to the year 2032, when John could have possibly seen 4 angels at the 4 corners of the earth, and the sun rising in the east. And I've highlighted that one single instance in magenta, and that was on 3/13 of 2016. It's the only time. And do you see something else completely and totally out of the ordinary about this date that I have highlighted in magenta on this page? It is the only time ever when all 4 of those bases were loaded, and there were not luminaries anywhere else in the heavens on that date. The only date that gives us a solution to his puzzle. Do you see the column on the right that says Other? That was so I could note where all the other planets were on all those dates, when I even came close to finding all 4 bases occupied. And that column is a complete mess, with planets in other constellations that I've noted on all those dates, except for one single date that totally stands out like a sore thumb. It's completely blank, because God had all 4 of his bases loaded on 3/13 of 2016. Exactly 8 years to the date, and exactly 8 chapters to the verse, until the Revelation 15 sign occurred in the heavens, which was God's magnificent menorah of all 7 of the luminaries, and the sun standing in the center to light them all. So this is the Revelation 7 sign again in Stellarium, as God had his bases loaded on 3/13 of 2016. We've got his team of all 7 on the field, with the sun ascending in the east to command them all, and from home plate. And the sun is rising in Aquarius, as it is 7 days before the equinox here. It looks like Mercury is up to bat, as it is exactly in the waters of Aquarius on this very date, which is just completely crazy to me, because it seems like every time something so key happens, that I always find some planet sitting right on that line of the waters of Aquarius. Then we have Venus, the church, or bride, right in the belly of Aquarius, as rivers of living water pour forth. On first base, summer solstice, we have the moon, and on second base, the fall equinox, we have Jupiter. And on third base, Scorpio, the winter solstice, for the age of Aquarius, we have Saturn. And it looks like Mars is also right there, so close to third base, playing shortstop, no doubt. And this 3/13 date, as I've shown in so many videos now, is so key and so connected to everything. In episode 6, I'll go over the menorah sign of 3/13 this year, and talk about those 15 verses that John spent on the Revelation 15 sign. So I hope you'll tune in for that one as well, if we aren't raptured out of here first, because the clock is ticking. Tonight would be fantastic for a rapture, and I hope to see you in the kingdom soon.